So today I'm going to do an FTP test. It's the one thing in cycling that absolutely gives me the fear, it gives me the dread. I'm nervous about it, I worry about it, I'm anxious about it. Can't sleep the night before, didn't sleep last night. But I'm going to get it out of the way. I've never actually done one. And if I'm going to go and race on Zwift and kind of fall in love with Zwift racing and riding, then I guess it would be good to know. So I'm going to do a step test rather than a 20-minute FTP test because I've never done one before, so I wouldn't really even know where to pace one. And I guess like down the line, if I ever chose to do one again, then I could probably do a 20-minute test knowing kind of where my ability was roughly at. So I'm going to do a step test this time, and then the goal of this is this is going to be like a fun little experience. I say fun, type 2 fun. But also, I'm going to commit to a 6-week structured training plan after this and then retest and see kind of where that gets me in terms of my performance. I had a day off yesterday, or I did some very light gravel cycling and a very kind of 3-mile easy jog. But it's kind of the one chance I've got in the build-up of what I've got going on over the next few weeks to do this where it's not just like I'm not completely fatigued. So I'm hoping that kind of works on my side. So why do I need an FTP test? You tell me. Why do I need an FTP? Why do I need to do an FTP test? Now, jokes aside, I love everything to do with science. I've got tons of qualifications in the sports background, and I find it really interesting. Basically, when it comes to thresholds, there's 2 points of which, when you are training and you're training aerobically and anaerobically, your lactate levels increase. And your first threshold, your lactate level will increase gradually because your body can no longer eradicate the lactate at the same rate at which it is being built up in the muscles. Then the second point, which is what we're trying to find a rough guide for today, is your functional threshold power. And this is the point where you build up so much lactate that effectively after you go over this point, your lactate just spikes. And that lactate is a byproduct of anaerobic respiration. So basically just doing too much or trying to do too much. Part of the byproduct is a toxin within that lactate, which basically stops your muscles from working. So that's the pain, that's the agony, that's everything that you are kind of fighting against when it comes to doing an FTP test. So if you can find out that second point, and then you can kind of roughly get a really good guide of just staying on the right side of it, you're always going to be able to maintain a certain level of performance in terms of wattage whilst riding without going over it, in which case your body then just kind of effectively blows up and you can't maintain that. Then you kind of go into just complete failure. And that's the whole point of it. So basically you train until you fail. That's it. Right, let's load up Zwift and get going, I guess. Right guys, you are obviously about to watch an FTP ramp test, which is the cycling version of watching paint dry. So I have included chapter markers, so if you don't want to watch the actual ramp test itself, then you can skip through to my result that will be in the chapter markers. Have a look. So there is a 5-minute warm-up. I actually did a 30-minute ride to kind of get me moving. There's me jazzing myself up, enjoying myself. It starts at 100 watts, so even in your warm-up you should reasonably be there or thereabouts. So the first few minutes are very easy, and I fast forward through a lot of it. I'll give you, obviously this is after the fact, so I'll give you a bit of a rundown. I'm still weighing in, I want to say this morning about 78.5 kg. That's definitely something I can lose. A lot of my upper body weight is a bit unnecessary, but finding it hard to shift. So the first few minutes, every minute, the wattage goes up by 20 watts. You got to hold it. It's basically called a ramp test because it only goes one way. The wattage just increases every minute and it gets harder and harder and harder. The one thing I definitely did notice was I was basically trying to do this off cadence. I'm just, I'm 40 years old. I'm finding that my leg strength isn't quite what it used to be. I've also got a 52 tooth front ring, and I think I'd probably be better off if I was riding a 50 or a 48, because cadence is definitely my strong point, not and I don't do enough strength work. So I'm hoping that if I get a good structured strength training program in here, as well as doing a structured training program, it's really going to make a difference to my cycling. The 52 front tooth chainring, just I don't have the strength. I don't feel like I have the strength when the wattage gets higher to keep it turning. I try and kind of make cadence my friend. Interestingly, my heart rate max through some of the races that I've done, when you're pushing yourself and then coming back off, then pushing yourself and coming back off, got so much higher than it ever got even close to doing this ramp test, which I thought was really interesting, because I was kind of looking at my heart rate a lot of the time and it felt comfortable, and then it never really ramped up in the same way as some of the Zwift races that I've done or that I like doing, which I thought was really interesting. Because I get to like 165 and I max out. I've seen 180. I've only seen it once, but I have seen 180. I was very happy about that once during a Zwift race. But on the ramp test, it felt very different. It felt comfortable, and then it gets to the point where it's just like agony. And the one thing that really felt like it hurt more than anything was my legs. Like the pain in the legs, just I didn't feel like I had the strength. So that's kind of my takeaways from this before we do anything. We're up at 300 watts. I'm going to try and hold that for a minute. Honestly, after the chat that I did earlier about the little lactate graph and basically the spike, the second LT2 spike, where it's your functional threshold point, the fall off as soon as you hit to that is phenomenal. You basically, 20 watts for a minute on a ramp test is quite a lot. So once you bump up, it's like, you're like, right, I've got this, bump up, and you're like, wow, do not have this. And that's exactly what happened to me. So we're nearing the point where, for me, it all becomes too much. You can see that it's been pretty steady on the bottom chart, where I've kind of just gradually increased wattage. 340 was kind of like, it feels all right. You can see me working. You can obviously probably start hearing me just panting like crazy. This is when I start focusing on cadence, trying to hit like 95, holding 95, maybe 100 cadence if possible. My heart rate's at 160, so this is it. We're back into real-time testing. So 340. I hold 360 for a minute, and then as soon as we hit 380, like I'm dead man walking or dead man cycling. I couldn't do it. I collapsed completely. So just keep an eye on things like cadence and heart rate, which is in the top, because I'm basically trying to hold 100 revolutions per minute on the cadence, and then my heart rate should slowly just start bumping up. I found this, I think it's just like the continual increase in load that makes it so hard, and then also because it was getting harder and harder for me, I wasn't as consistent. I wasn't like holding 360. I was having to get the pedals turning again once my cadence dropped down, and so the consistency and the smoothness of my cycling just kind of falls off a cliff. I think at this point, with 10 seconds to go, I was just determined to make it to the 380 mark and then go again. So 165 I just saw on the heart rate, and that's about the limit of it. We hit 380, and that is basically me cream crackered. I'm absolutely done. Off the bike. Yeah, but 165 is nothing for my HR. I found that really interesting. Give it a second and it will come up with my result as I bail. I think the best thing to do is bail and then, collapse. So there it is. My FTP is now 272. Good job. Thank you. So I had a look at this little charts. I thought these were quite interesting, just to kind of see how it ramps up. And then more interestingly is my power curve, where I actually did put in some of my best, I don't know what it is, like 30 days, 50 days, whatever it is, but that's the result, guys, 272. Oh man, so there we go, guys. My FTP came up, according to Zwift, at 272. I know categorically that a ramp test will probably give you a bit of a higher estimate than what your actual FTP is, but bearing in mind my current training load, the fact that I've never done one before, and just like general fatigue from everything I've been doing recently, I'm going to probably estimate that it is roughly 270, which I'm pretty happy with, and it's great to have a really good starting block. Now, what can you do to improve your FTP? So first and foremost, biologically, you can be predisposed to either being able to handle a really high lactate or basically being able to flush lactate very efficiently. And you can work on things to some degree to kind of improve your management of lactate and the byproduct of just training really hard. So things like 40-20s, going from doing really high intensity to bringing it back down and just repeating that and keeping that rest period short gets you more adapted to being able to flush the lactate out and improves the way that your body can recover and just get rid of any of the byproduct from a really over threshold effort. So my goal for the next 6 weeks is to try and stick to a program and see if a little bit of structure as well as a little bit of Zwift racing, because we know how much I love that, will actually help me improve my FTP. That, and the only other thing I can do is maybe just drop my weight a little bit. I used to climb a lot, I used to go to the gym quite a lot, and there are definitely a bunch of superfluous muscles that I do not need when it comes to things like running and cycling. So I don't know how I'm going to do that. I eat very well. I always kind of look after the food that I put into my body, the fuel that I like to take on board. Probably eat a little bit too much every now and again, but that's just because, you know, food is life. But that'll be it, guys. That's it. That was I'm pretty happy with it. I'd love to taper for an FTP test or kind of take it seriously. The last time I did a proper one was many, many years ago in a lab. So I think next time, a few weeks of structured training. Next time, do a proper 20-minute test, see where we come out and see whether we can nudge it up into the 300s. So let me know what you think, guys. Is that a reasonable test score? Is that a reasonable result? I think my watts per kg comes out about 3.5 watts per kg. So it kind of puts me in that C, maybe kind of being able to race in the B category, or being able to race, just not really being able to compete. But I'm definitely going to try and do more B races as part of my training to improve my FTP in general. I'll see you guys in the next one. Let me know in the comments what you thought, whether you've done one, and drop your FTP below.